reason why we record it is because some people aren't able to make this meeting. We're going to put this on our website. And that leads me to my last point is that there's going to be a lot of links in this that will be helpful for you. We're going to put this on our website, just like we did last year, so that you have access to it. Sometimes it takes the website team, a week, maybe even 2 weeks, depending on how busy they are. If you really feel like you need the material in this sooner than that, just shoot me an email. I'm happy to pass this along to you so you don't have to wait. But that's it for now. So we're just going to go ahead and get started. And we're going to cover a lot in our time together. I imagine this will take about 30 minutes, given how long this has taken in previous years. We're going to cover eligibility and requirements, like who qualifies for TAG and why, and what are the requirements of taking the grant. We're going to talk about TAG funding and what you can use the funds on. We'll spend a little time on what are the similarities between this year and last year. For those of you that did this last year, that will be helpful. And then talk about what are the differences between this year and last year. That's a shorter list. We'll talk about what exactly gets submitted. And then we'll talk about once you do submit, then what's the review process like? And then we'll go over a few next steps that you can do after this webinar. And like I said, we'll take some time at the end for any questions, and then we'll provide some resources too. Okay, my slide's not advancing. Still not advancing. Okay. We'll start with what districts are eligible for TAG funding. If you're on this webinar right now, then obviously you're eligible. But if you're curious what exactly made us eligible, it's if your district has one or more schools that meet the following, these three sub-bullets here. If one of your schools or more has a federal designation, which means CSI, TSI, ATSI, those are acronyms, and you know that we love acronyms in education. I'll just tell you what they mean in plain English. CSI means you have a school that was identified in the bottom 10 percentiles, or bottom 5 percentiles, sorry.
And so it was reported to the police.
Sorry, if folks don't mind muting, I'm just getting a little background noise.
Think that he could have been targeted.
The second one is TSI. That's if you have a school that is in.
That there's so many parts that I don't have any factual evidence of what the SRO has. I don't have the actual evidence that everything about
background noise
Heidi has.
Oh, much better. Thank you. So TSI schools are going to be the schools that have a student group, one specific student group in the bottom 5 percentiles for 2 years in a row, and then ATSI is 3 years in a row. So if you have a school that meets one of those federal designations, then you would be eligible for TAG. Most of those schools are captured in the second bullet. If you're in the lowest 10 percentiles on our state accountability system, you're eligible for TAG. If you're one of the schools that's identified as underperforming, we have 10 of those schools in our state, then you're eligible for TAG. So if you meet one of those criteria, if you have one school that meets one of those criteria, then you're eligible for TAG funding. In terms of who's eligible for this specific year, everybody that was eligible last year, every school that was eligible on the 22-23 TAG is eligible this year. So as I'm sure lots of you are well aware, this month we will be getting accountability data that will be, reflected of this year. So even if you have schools that will not be eligible based on the new data, we're still going to say anyone that has been identified as eligible as of right now, as of today, will be eligible all year, regardless of what the 2023 accountability data will say. So you might have more schools that become eligible based on that data. We will add that to the list. You might have fewer schools, that would be great, but we're still going to keep the same eligibility list. It can only get bigger, it won't get smaller for the rest of the year. Then at the bottom, we have schools that are not eligible. These are going to be schools served by the Strategic Transformation Office. That's going to be schools that are in schools and districts in receivership, like Holyoke, Southbridge, Lawrence. Charter schools, virtual schools aren't eligible. They have different pots of money that are eligible or available to them. So that's why they're not part of this. And moving on. Okay, districts and schools receiving TAG funds. If you're taking the funds, and I presume you will, you're agreeing to do these 3 points. You're gonna engage with someone from CSDP, another acronym. That's our Center for School and District Partnership. You're agreeing to engage with somebody from the CSDP assistant staff. For most of you, that's going to be your SSOS regional team. You have liaisons assigned to your school or your district, I mean, and then we do have others that fall under the larger CSDP umbrella. You have a liaison assigned to your district as well. You're going to work with whoever that person is. The second one, you're going to submit updated district prioritization submissions. This is the big one. All districts are doing something. It might look different from district to district, but you're submitting something that says these are the priorities or priority that our district is identifying for this coming year. And you're agreeing that you're going to do that as part of this grant. And then the third one is that you're going to agree to do some progress monitoring. In 2 years ago and beyond that, we had something called monitoring site visits and targeted site visits. Last year, we piloted a new progress monitoring, and then it's going to be rolled out on a much larger scale starting this year. And so you're going to agree that you would be part of that process as well. Okay. TAG funding sources. We actually got more money this year. Yay. So the TAG amount is a little larger than in years past, 4.5 million. About 3.5 million of that comes from Title I, and we call that Fund Code 325. I'll get into more details of what that actually means later. And then the state is contributing a little over $1 million to this. So that is up to $4.5 million. All of the funds, whether you're 325 or 222, all of those funds must be expended by June 30th, 2024. If you find that, wait a minute, we wanted to spend some of our TAG funding on something in the summer, we wanted to send, teachers to professional development in the summer, that's fine. I'll be reaching out to everyone in the spring to see if you do fall in that category and you think, yeah, I think we will spend some money in the summer. We'll reach out to you and you can extend the grant by 2 months. It's not a very arduous process. We don't need to go into that for now, but for right now, think about how can we expend the grant by June 30th? And if that's just not going to work for you, we'll talk this spring about some options. All right, I know folks are going to wonder, all right, I did this last year. What's the same? What's different? Okay, here's what's the same. If you were part of the application process last year and you look at this year's application, you're going to say this looks almost identical. And that's by design. We're trying to strike that balance where we want to make improvements. There are things that we can do better, so we try and make improvements, but we also don't want districts to feel like they have to learn a whole new grant year in and year out. So for the most part, we made some tweaks based on some feedback you gave us last year, but I think you'll find that for the most part, it looks like last year. We're still going to have the same focus on district systems to support schools. That's what TAG is. It's supposed to go to the districts to come up to either create or enhance a system that is supporting the schools that you serve. And the third bullet is a huge one. We're still looking for the same alignment with TAG funding to whatever priority you identified. We want to make sure that that TAG funding is aligned to that priority. And then the fourth one, we're still using ag grants. If you were responsible for other grants in your district, you might have some of those are on this new system that we're using, which is going to be a huge improvement, and I'm very excited for it. Our specific center is one of the last ones that's transitioning. So we are still using ag grants this year. When we're having this TAG conversation next year, I'll be telling you all about the new system and how wonderful it is, and you'll be using that. But for this year, still using ag grants. This begs the question, if you're telling me what's the same, then tell me what's different from last year. First one is allocations may be different. Most district allocations are going to be similar to last year. It's going to be plus or minus just a small amount of money. Some are actually going to be identical to last year, but allocations may be different. There's lots of reasons for that, but the biggest reason would be is schools are becoming eligible or leaving eligibility. If you have schools that are improving, we use last year's data, and if you had schools exit, say the bottom 10 percentiles, then your allocation would actually be smaller. That's a good thing though, right? And some schools are having, or some districts are having more schools enter the bottom 10 percentiles, so you might find your allocations a little bigger. One of the things that's different is we're shifting to funding being based on a range of eligible schools. This is intended to be a district grant. So one more or less eligible school shouldn't have this profound impact on the district. So we're shifting more towards a range of eligible schools, but ultimately it ended up not impacting the allocation that you're going to receive very much. But in general, it can be summed up as the more eligible schools you have, the more funding you'll get, which is how it should be. We're also trying something where we are making the floor, the least amount of a TAG grant, much larger than it was in the past. We have 2 districts. Our smallest ones would get 30,000, but everyone else, even small districts that maybe aren't super tiny, will be getting 50,000. So some are getting a pretty big increase. Those that were getting like $15,000 and $20,000 grants like last year. Our thinking is that amount of money maybe wasn't enough to drive the amount of change that we or the schools and districts were hoping for. So we're trying a much larger floor this year to see if that can provide additional support for your district. The second big difference is the end date for all districts is now June 30th. That's going to be the same for some of you, but others who are getting that 325 grant, you might be saying, well, last year we got to go to August 31st to spend your grant. That's true. As an agency, we're shifting to June 30th. This isn't like a tag thing. This is an all grants at DESE thing. But the option is still there. If you want to spend your money, if you need to spend your money in the summer, that option is still going to be there for you. All right, I'm going to pause. I can't actually see the chat because I've got the screen. Karen, Moira, are there any chat questions that I need to address?
Nope. So far, there have been no questions from the audience.
All right. Must be because this webinar is super clear. All right, well, we'll keep moving. We also tried something new last year that we're going to continue this year, where we update allocations after the accountability figures are released. In years past, we used to wait until we got the data in September, and then we'd release TAG, and then it would come out usually around November. But we wanted to get districts their money sooner. So that's why we're using last year's accountability figures to say who's eligible. But we'll, of course, get them this month for the new figures. If you have a school that is adding a whole bunch more eligible schools than you did in the past year, then we're updating the allocation to give you more money. But I just want to make sure that it's very clear. If you have schools that are exiting eligibility because they're doing wonderfully and are no longer in the bottom 10 percentiles, we're not deducting. I'm not going to be making a phone call to you and saying, you know what, you had some really good progress this year. Can you please send us, $50,000? That's not how it's going to work. Everyone, the list that you see on the website that says your allocation, it's not going to go below that. You may get an increase, but no one's going to get a decrease. The reason why we can't say exactly like, yes, if you get 3 more schools, you will definitely get an increase in allocations, because we're not exactly sure how many of you will have more or fewer schools. We have a certain amount of money available. We mentioned we have $4.5 million, and most of it's been earmarked already. But we did bookmark a little bit of that money for newly eligible schools. But if there, for some reason, 20 districts have way more newly eligible schools, obviously we wouldn't be able to give a substantial amount to everyone. So we can't guarantee that amount because we just don't know how many new schools they're going to be. But we can say if your district does have a significant increase in eligible schools, you're going to receive more money. Okay, this is another example of questions that we get. They're like, okay, help me wrap my head around what exactly we can spend TAG funding on. We want to make sure that you remember that TAG funding is intended to support whatever priority your district identified as what they're working on this year. TAG can support implementing that priority. So it helps me to have, give me a concrete example to help contextualize this for me. So here's the one we're using. Let's say your district uses, all these data points to show we really need to focus on tier 1 math instruction. That's where we need to focus our efforts on this year. So if that's what you identify in the district prioritization session that you attended, TAG can support that in so many different ways. It could support paying stipends to a teacher for them to go attend PD. You may find that you want to do the PD during the school year, so you're having them go during the school day. TAG could support paying substitutes to come cover that teacher's class while they're attending the session. You may find, we're doing this across multiple schools. It's more cost effective to bring a PD provider to the district. You could pay that provider's cost to bring them to the district. That PD provider may say, we need everyone taking the training to read this book. And you could use TAG to pay for, the books that are being required for that professional development. You really could spend it on myriad different ways. The main point here is to know that the TAG funding would need to align with whatever that district priority you identified was. Okay, you might feel like I'm repeating myself over and over, but I'm doing it on the points that I think are the most important. Absolutely needs to make sure that your TAG funds are aligned with whatever the district identified as what your priority is for this year. So we have some recommendations. We have two links here. One's the educational vision that our commissioner put out this year. This is a great resource, and the CSDP Coherence Guidebook is one that our specific center, lots of my colleagues worked hard on that one. Here's some good links that will help you with some fund use recommendations. Ultimately, looking at the third bullet here, within those priorities, we want you to know there actually is some flexibility. It doesn't always feel that way, particularly with, funds coming from the state. It might feel like you're being boxed in. But if the funding is being aligned with what the district priority is, there's actually going to be flexibilities. That's why we showed you the previous slide. It could be paying substitute teachers. It could be paying stipends to teachers to go to PD. It could be paying for the PD itself or the materials for the PD. It could pay for stipends to go around and watch other teachers to make sure it's implemented with fidelity. There's so many ways that TAG could support that, as long as it's aligned to whatever the district identified as their priority. All right, another obvious question. When is this due? It is going to be due later than in years past. Last year, end of October. So you have plenty of time. We strongly encourage you to submit sooner. Like, one of the reasons we're rolling out TAG earlier than we have in the past is so that you'll have more time to spend it. Districts get their money once they're approved. So the sooner you're approved, sooner you get your money. So we'd love it if people were submitting in, the end of September and not waiting until October 31st. Because if you did, and then let's say it's 2 more weeks until you're approved, you're not getting your money till almost Thanksgiving. And by that point, we're well into the school year. So we'd love it if we're getting a flood of applications submitted this month. Obviously, we understand you have many, many priorities that are pressing on your time. But the due date's the end of October. We really encourage you to submit much sooner than that. All right, another question we get asked are, what exactly am I submitting into Ed Grants? Okay, there are 3 things you're submitting into Ed Grants. And if you've done other grants for your district, you're going to find that this is really similar to other grants that you've done. Number 1, you're going to enter the budget directly into Ed Grants. So that means you're going to put the money for stipends in the stipend line, the money, for supplies in the supplies line, just like all the other grants you've done in Ed Grants. Number 2, that's the TAG narrative. That's going to be unique to this grant. So this is the part where you're going to write out, this is what we're spending the money on. I'll go over that in more detail in a moment. The third one's an attached signed cover page. This is the same for every grant that comes from our office. You have to have, a superintendent or a business manager sign the cover page saying that you're aware of the grant. All right, let's go into more detail about what exactly you're submitting. This is the narrative. This is a screenshot of it. It's a 2-page narrative. I think this is about as streamlined as we can possibly make an application given the amount of money that we're giving out. It's a 2-page application. The first page is directions. So really, it's just this page 2 that you're doing the actual writing on. And you're not even writing that much because you can see you're putting it in a table. So there's 5 columns that you're going to complete. First one is an activity. This is where you're just telling us what specific activity you're doing. You may find that you're only needing like 1 or 2 rows to answer this. So activity might be professional development to all our elementary teachers to support HQIM. That's all we're looking for here, like 1 sentence or even a fragment of a sentence for the activity. And then the second one, that that's showing that you are connecting it to whatever the district priority that you identified was. Because that's probably the most integral part of this grant. It's the most important to focus on. How does it align? The third column, the middle one, that's the description. This is where you'll actually write a few sentences. We're not looking for a novel here. We put one paragraph maximum per activity in bold, hoping that you're not going to feel like you need to write a whole lot here. We do think that you could, in one paragraph or less, provide an explanation of what exactly you're doing with this money. The fourth one's a cost, and the fifth one is you telling us who is getting this money. So for some of you, you may only have one eligible school, and maybe you're just writing that one school. Others, you might have multiple priorities, but you're going to do this with your elementary schools and this with your secondary schools. This is where you'll note that for us. Or maybe it's, the whole district. You're doing something at the district level that will trickle down to all of your schools. You'll note that for us here. Again, we're not looking for you to write a whole lot in that column. You're really just writing the whole district or elementary schools or all our secondary schools. That's all we're looking for here. This is it, basically. This is the application that you're writing. The rest is the signed cover page, which is nothing. You're just signing it and attaching it. And the other one's putting the dollar amounts in the budget. So we're really making an effort to make this as light a lift as possible. All right, here's a screenshot of what the signed cover sheet looks like. If you did this last year, you're going to say this looks identical, except you changed the dates to 2024. You'll select the district name from the drop-down menu. A bunch of information will pre-populate, so you don't even have to write that. Just make sure you sign it and attach that when you submit an ed grants. This is really straightforward. It's the same for all grants. Okay. I'm going to pause there again. Karen, Moira, anything I need to elevate? Oh, Karen, you're muted if you're saying something.
Sorry, I was trying to say something. So there's a question from one of our districts saying that in their preliminary data, one of their schools moved up in the percentile rankings, like well above their 10th percentile, but it was also identified as requiring assistance or intervention. It wasn't eligible in 2022. Just a clarification question as to whether this means that the school is once again going to be eligible for TAG.
Okay, yeah, this is a great question. Actually, I believe that's one of my FAQs, but we'll go ahead and answer it now. If you have a school, we'll say the school was in the 8th percentile on last year's accountability, and now it's in the 14th. So it moved out. So it would no longer be eligible. That piece won't actually come into play until next year. So because, we released this grant based on 2022 accountability data, that school is going to be eligible for the entire school year, this school year, 23-24 school year. So it's not going to impact your TAG allocation. It's not going to have any sort of negative impact if you get great news in the 2023 accountability data.
Michael, just to clarify, this was a school that was not eligible last year.
Is not eligible at, oh, it went down.
Was not eligible last year.
Oh, and now it is eligible?
I don't know, maybe the specifics could be discussed later if it's not in general.
I can explain out loud if that would be helpful.
Yeah, go ahead,
That would be very helpful.
We have a school that is in the 30th percentile. However, in the preliminary data on the security portal, it says that this school is requiring assistance or intervention. So last year it was in the 23rd percentile. This year it's in the 30th. The question is, given that it's been given this tag of requiring assistance or intervention, and given that it was not eligible last year, and that it's in the 30th percentile, does the requiring assistance or intervention language alone mean that we are eligible for TAG dollars?
So I can take this one if that's helpful.
Thanks,
Okay, no problem. So the answer to the question is it depends. And we would need to dig in a little bit more into why the school was designated as requiring assistance intervention. But we will be running sort of the new sort of district allotments based on eligible schools once we have the final accountability data next week and be reaching out to districts to let you know if any changes in schools, status means that you may be getting more resources, and any requirements of like what you would need to be doing to support that school. So more information will be coming next week. But I would need to look into that particular school in more detail just to understand if it meets the criteria for more tag. The other element that's important to consider is that because we're doing this for a range of schools, it's possible that just one new school coming in doesn't actually change the district's allocation. So we can follow up with you specifically on that, though.
If I can ask one follow-up question, does this suggest that we should postpone submitting our TAG grant until we know whether or not this school does or does not receive funding?
No.
You don't really have to, but anything that would be done for any new schools can be done in an amendment once you've had a chance to sort of process the data and be able to decide what you need to do for that school. So I would recommend you just move forward with your application for the schools that you have now, and then we'll follow up with any changes that might come based on different designations for schools moving forward.
Thank you.
Adding funds later to your allocation is going to be a pretty simple process. So our preference would be for you to apply sooner, get your money sooner, and then we can add the money later if need be. Okay, were there any other questions? All right, well, we'll keep going. All right, well, that is good timing. So this week had a flurry of questions from various district folks, some really good questions. And the ones that I got multiple times, I'm including here. One that I had was, what's the difference between Fund Code 222 and 325? When you're trying to apply an ed grant, you'll see those two fund codes. From the district perspective, the difference is essentially nothing. These are accounting figures that we use. As I mentioned earlier, we have some state funding and some Title I funding that are supporting TAG. So it is really just telling the people that handle the money at DESE which pot of money is New Bedford's grants or Boston's grant coming from. That's what the 222, 325 tells us. But from your perspective, they're subject to the same everything, the same spending rules, same end date. It's all the same. So this is not a detail that is going to impact you at all. It just tells us, it tells the people that manage money where it's coming from. All right, another one I had multiple times this week. What if the 2023 data shows that we have fewer TAG eligible schools than last year? I hope that's the case for you. I hope that means because your schools are, showing tremendous growth and now they're not TAG eligible. That would be wonderful. Will your allocation be reduced? No allocation is going to be reduced this year. I know we've said this multiple times, but I also know that's on a lot of folks' mind. No one's allocation is being reduced this year. Based on preliminary numbers, we anticipate that most allocations are going to remain the same, and we think a few might go up, but I can tell you with certainty that 0 will be going down. And then the other question that we got multiple times is, what if the 2023 data shows that we have more TAG eligible schools? So yeah, you have some schools that in the past were above the 10th percentiles, and now they are in percentiles 1 through 10. If you have more of those, will your allocation be increased? Erica kind of touched on this already too. The answer there is maybe. If your school district is having a significant increase in eligible schools, then yeah, you can probably count on it. If you go from 4 eligible schools to 8, then yes, you probably will receive an increase. But the way that TAG is designed, it's more of a district level grant that then supports schools. So having plus or minus 1 school on your eligibility list shouldn't have a profound impact on the supports that you're providing. So that's why we don't anticipate there being a huge number getting an increase. But again, if you have a district that has just a huge amount of new schools, then yes, then you should get more money. All right. Some next steps. I like to put this in webinars that I lead because sometimes when I'm the participant, I'm like, all right, this is a lot of information. What should I do now? Step one, I would consult with your regional SSOS team or a CSDP liaison if that's who works with your school or district. These people are a tremendous resource, and they can think through. A lot of them have done tag, a lot, and can think through any sort of challenges that you might be wrestling with. It's a great resource. Take advantage of them. I would reach out with them. Step two, as you develop your application, please, please, please make sure it aligns to what your district identified as the priority they want to focus on. I mean, it's just going to be just an automatic, we're going to need revisions if you're saying our priority is, literacy in the early grades, and then, you submit a tag application that has to do with like improving high school graduation. Like that's a huge disconnect. So we want to make sure whatever you identify as, you're picking the priority. We just want to make sure that the tag application is aligned to that priority. Once you've done steps 1 and 2, then you upload it into EdGrants, and we'll start doing the work on our end to review it. All right, I know we're taking lots of time for questions, and I want to still build in some time for that. You may, after you absorb some of this in the next day or 2 or week, have other questions. I think it's helpful to know, like, who should I direct my questions to? So if you have substantive questions about your grant, like we're really trying to think through, should we use it on this activity or this activity? Those kinds of deep questions are really good for your SSOS team or the CSDP liaison, whatever person from our office is working with your school or district. That's the person I would direct those really meaty questions to. If you have technical questions about anything about the forms or something, I have lived those forms for the past few months. I can answer just about any question you might have about that. Progress monitoring, like I mentioned earlier, we did it one way for many years and then piloted a new way last year. And now we're really starting to expand that with this coming year. Erica Champagne's our guru on anything to do with progress monitoring, so you can reach out to her. All right, and then the RFP, I sent you when I sent this email about this webinar as well, I sent the link to the RFP. It's also here as well. It's on our website, and pretty much anything you need to know about the grant is going to be included in that RFP. So that's going to tell you, like, how much money do we get? What are some examples? Where's the narrative application that I need to type in? All of that is going to be on the RFP. So you can click on that. Okay, that is definitely not how I was as a teacher, where I would just talk at people for a long time. I don't like doing that way, but it's kind of how webinars are set up. So I would love to take as much time as you need. If you have questions, please come off mute or send them in the chat box, and we'll spend the rest of the time answering questions. If you feel like your questions are answered, or you just want to percolate on this and get back to me later, now's a good time to sign off. And I look forward to talking with each of you throughout the year. So thank you everyone for taking the time. I know at the start of school year is busy for everyone, so we appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Linda.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Karen, Moira, did I miss any chat questions?
No, there was nothing else in the chat. I'm going to stop recording now.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to stop
I
sharing.
think I'm trying to find the record button.
Thanks, Dan.
Nice job, Michael.
Thank you.
Bottom. The record button, it's still recording because I haven't. Oh, there it is. You find it?